So I've got this presentation on the science of reading, and because I am a dyslexic individual, I wanted to approach it from my point of view of how it was growing up when there wasn't this science of how dyslexia works and how reading is taught to dyslexic students. And so it's been pretty eye-opening to see some of the new science because growing up we did not get to experience this stuff and this new concept of teaching reading to dyslexic students, which is absolutely amazing. So, the dyslexic mind, they have determined 1 out of every 5 students, so that is almost 20% of a typical classroom, is going to be dyslexic of some sort. So it may be a mild dyslexia or it may be an extreme dyslexia, but there is about 20% of your classroom that is going to have trouble understanding reading and some of those concepts. So, that's really the reason why we need this science behind reading, because otherwise, the typical student will learn to read kind of however it's taught. But there is about 20% of us that need some help because our brains just don't get it. So the human brain naturally gets the spoken language, but doesn't get reading necessarily. And so I have this caption here of how the right brain sees things compared to the left brain. And so I tell everybody that I think in pictures, which is very odd when I tell them pretty much everything I see is some type of picture. I don't see the word, and if there isn't a picture for a word like or and or the, I have the most trouble with that. I don't even understand the difference in left and right. So, oh my gosh. And I'm a 44-year-old adult. So the science of reading, they have figured out that the dyslexic mind compared to a typical non-impaired mind, that there is a certain spots in your brain that you should be getting signals when you are reading, and the dyslexic brain is not getting those signals. And so that's what this science has really taught us now that brain scanning is a little more prevalent, a little more easy to use, that we can see it more, is that it allows us to look and see how a non-impaired brain compared to a dyslexic brain understands reading. So the state of Arkansas has embraced this idea because we really are not seeing a lot of students coming out of school and graduating that have the ability to read. And that gives all of our students this leg up. And so in 2008, the state of Arkansas put in the RISE initiative that allows us to teach every teacher, no matter what your subject matter is, the basics behind the science of reading. And so I'm an art teacher, and I'm taking this class, and this is the first time I've heard some of these words like phoneme and sounds that don't make sense to me because I didn't learn to read this way. So there's lots of different theories of reading. And so the Erie model of learning to read shows that there's 4 different progressions that the student goes through, and they're kind of these defined progressions that every student will go through. And so there's the pre-alphabetic, which is before they understand their ABCs. They understand the spoken language, and they can understand the ah, be, say kind of sounds, but they're not connected to letters yet. And then the partial alphabetic allows readers to combine letters and sounds. And so we start getting this phonetic cueing. And then we move into the full alphabetic so that they get the phonemes, the sight words. They're starting to put letters together to be able to read the words. And then the consolidated alphabet, which is this final phase that allows these student patterns to be consolidated into the brain. So there's lots of different theories behind it, but this theory is probably the most used in a lot of, or has been used the longest. So Scarborough's theory of this rope, so there is these many strands. There's this language comprehension and this word recognition. And so the word recognition section is really that area where the dyslexic brain has the most trouble. It is that phonetic awareness that we do not get unless it is taught to us. We don't get this decoding. We don't understand this process unless it is absolutely broken down and taught to a dyslexic student. And so there is this rope and all these different levels of language comprehension and word recognition are kind of tied together to create reading. And so it is that you've got to have the syllables and the phonemes and this decoding and sight recognition of a word. But it also starts wrapping in this vocabulary, language structure. It's the whole that tied together gives us those reading skills. In the four-part processor, it is really broken down into how the brain is receiving this information. And so the bottom is this phonologic processor, which is this phoneme. That is really the area that the dyslexic student has their most difficulty, and it's the very basic understanding that we don't necessarily understand. Our brain is not functioning like other people, and so we're not keyed into the left side of the brain and how it needs to be processing. So this sound blending and phonemes is in this phonologic processing. And then the orthographic processing is where phonics is taught, and reading input and writing input. So it's this combination of those two is where the phonics brings together everything. And so then we move up in to this process, into the meaning processor, which is where we start getting our vocabulary and the understanding of words. And then our final step is this context processor, is what starts making sense of how text is put together, and the final thing. And fluency is the main idea behind it. And until a student has fluency and can have their brain processing these steps without necessarily having to think about it, is kind of the idea behind what needs to happen to have a dyslexic student understand reading. And it is still this fluency that I have trouble with in certain areas. And so I can tell that my brain has created these patches that, so it's searching for this answer, and it doesn't have that fluency. It's searching, where with these new science of reading, it allows a student to, once they learn it, they have it, it's automatic, it's fluent. They are not searching in that brain. And then our simple view of reading is that you've got decoding times, and that multiplication thing is really the essence of what this is, times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So without either decoding or language comprehension, so if you have a 0 in either one of those areas, you will never have reading comprehension. So decoding is being able to recognize a word, to break it down and understand how it's put together, the sounds that are in it, the spelling behind it. And then language comprehension is the meaning behind the spoken word. So the sentences, putting that together allows us to get reading comprehension, and the oral language that's behind it. And so that's really that simple view, is if you have a 0 in either one of those, decoding or language comprehension, you will never have reading comprehension. So let's talk about these basic ideas behind the science of reading. So phonologic awareness is really, once I've started studying this, I've realized that that is really our area that is the biggest missing link to a dyslexic student. And it's these very simple spoken phonemes. So it is the way a sound of a letter is before there's the alphabet. And if a dyslexic student can be taught before they understand letters, or their brain has started creating these weird links, that the individual sounds of a word before they understand what the word is, different things, that they can be the foundation for the consonants and the vowel sounds. So phonics is that link of the sounds of the words and the actual letters. That is what phonics is. And so once a child can understand that there's this spoken word and then there's written word, it's putting those together, which is the phonics. So fluency is what we want. And so it is that ability to read a text without having to think about the word, without having to think about what is happening. You automatically do this. And so until a dyslexic student can master that phoneme awareness and that phonics, and do it fluently, they will not be able to read. So vocabulary is that last link that is understanding what a word means. And so once a student has this strong working vocabulary, then, everything is possible. We are starting to understand how reading works, and that we can be a productive citizen with our reading abilities. So the idea behind code emphasis versus meaning emphasis. So code is really that phonemic awareness. And meaning is really just understanding what the word is. And so they have realized that a dyslexic student really needs to be taught that code emphasis. We've got to break it down to this phonemic, those phonemes, before we can do anything else, or we will never quite have that fluency in reading. And orthographic mapping is that oral language behind these sounds. So it is how our brain sees that phonemic awareness and starts to see those letters and putting those pictures together in our brain. And so what basically the idea behind all of this is that dyslexic brains can read and can do it as well as anybody else if we're taught and understand the science behind it, that we get why this dyslexic student is patching these right sides of the brain and creating these pathways that they don't need to learn the basic functions of reading. And if we can teach a student so that we can reroute those parts in the brain, and so our left side of our brain is functioning, then anything's possible. That's when we can allow students to have amazing careers, because dyslexic students are super individuals. They're smart and they're creative and their brain is super amazing. But we don't have those basics that in society make us seem like we're unintelligent, that we don't understand spelling, we don't understand reading. There's those basics that we need to understand. And so with the science of reading, we have now become able to allow the dyslexic student to conquer the world. Thank you.